Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines here on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio, we have our reporters Kwon Swa and Son Bo-kyung. Guys, welcome back.
Hello, happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you guys. You guys have any Halloween plans? No, right?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah,
Not really.
because Paulina Maldonado, SJ, I can't wait to see you with a Halloween costume on Monday. I'm not going to dress up. So, Hooligan KJ, you two. You guys, I'm going to
you
ruin
should.
it. It's a news program, guys. I'll dress up like a news presenter is what I'm going to be doing.
He doesn't have to. He's already maybe looking like someone.
Maybe so. Halloween, that's right, all around, just around the corner here. But no, you're not going to be seeing me dressed up there. But what is scary is some remarks made by Russian President Vladimir Putin here, who warned South Korea that if the country provides weapons to Ukraine, relations between Seoul and Moscow will be ruined. So let's get this latest message from Vladimir Putin. What exactly did he say?
Well, Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Thursday held a wide-ranging keynote speech at the Valdai Discussion Club in Moscow. This is an annual conference of international policy experts. So the main topic was the situation in Ukraine and also other global affairs were discussed. But little did we know that the Russian leader would target Korea, South Korea to be exact, in his remarks, which actually came after a number of questions regarding tensions between China and the U.S. over Taiwan and North Korea's nuclear program. So, despite not having been asked directly about South Korea, Putin used the opportunity to warn Seoul. While mentioning that Russia has good relations with South Korea and had always the opportunity to have dialogues with both South and North Korea, he said, quote, "Now we know that the Republic of Korea has decided to supply weapons and ammunition to Ukraine," adding that this will destroy the relationship between South Korea and Russia. Also, in what appears to be a quite provocative message, he said, how would South Korea react if Russia resumes cooperation with North Korea in this area? Closing off with, would it make you happy? I ask you to pay attention to this. Now, as a matter of fact, South Korea so far only sent medical supplies such as general-purpose ventilators and first aid kits, humanitarian aid, and military supplies such as bulletproof helmets, tents, and blankets to Ukraine. It never offered weapons under the principle that it cannot provide destructive weapons.
And this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about supplying Ukraine with different assistance, right? South Korea was being very cautious as not to supply them with lethal weapons. And, the U.S. has been pressuring them. The Ukrainian officials had come to Seoul asking South Korean government to give them more weapons. But this is exactly one of the reasons for why they've decided not to do so. I don't know how, if Russia does indeed have some kind of evidence as to if they're really supplying them with weapons and ammunition. From what I understand, it's just non-lethal weapons that we've been supplying Ukraine. But what were some other comments that Putin made during the forum?
Well, prior to Putin's comment on South Korea, he blamed the U.S. for North Korea's continuous nuclear development, claiming it was the U.S. that changed its stance last minute after Pyongyang agreed with Washington's proposals regarding its nuclear program, namely the U.S. slapping of sanctions on the North. Now, what appeared to be the general gist, meanwhile, during his speech, President Putin referred to the shaping of a new world order, making comments on China, India, North Korea, Saudi Arabia that highlight cooperation with Russia. And he also sided with China on the Taiwan issue. And here's a statement he made. Why did this grandmother have to drag herself to Taiwan in order to provoke China into some kind of retaliatory action? So who do you think he was referring to? It was U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And in regards to Ukraine, Putin made it seem as if he is open for a dialogue, and it's the Ukrainian leadership that does not want to peacefully negotiate with Russia. And mentioning the U.S. here again, saying it would be very easy to solve the matter if the U.S. would give Ukraine a signal to change its position. And then he also said that, I'll just read out the quote here, "We are standing at a historical frontier. Ahead is probably the most dangerous unpredictable and at the same time important decade since the end of World War II. So it's kind of ironic. His statements here seem like something that other people would have to say at this point and not Russia. But
he's making it seem as if, Russia had no other choice but to do what they did. And they're not the victims of all this. And, from the past few days right now, they've been playing, we're the victims here. Ukraine is planning to use a dirty bomb and they're going to blame it on us, make it look like we used it. But, a lot of people are saying, well, that could easily be just Russia and say that Ukraine is, falsely accusing Russia and so forth. So they're playing that victim game because the international community right now, everyone is pointing their finger at Russia. But we talked about this kind of statement of warning from Putin to South Korea. What was President Yoon's response to Putin's warning, Bo-kyung?
Sure. So at the doorstep interview on Friday morning, President Yoon said that, quote, "We've provided humanitarian and peaceful assistance to Ukraine in solidarity with the international community, but never lethal weapons or any such things. But in any case, it's a matter of our sovereignty, and we're trying to maintain peaceful and good relations with all countries around the world, including Russia."
Now, moving to North Korea, which has conducted yet another ballistic missile test on this Friday, just 2 weeks since its latest provocations. So let's get the latest on this.
North Korea launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea this Friday. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the North fired the SRBMs between 11:59 a.m. and 12:18 p.m. from the Tongcheon area in Gangwon-do province, again into the East Sea. They flew around 230 kilometers at a maximum altitude of 24 kilometers at top speeds of around Mach 5. And the JCS said, while reinforcing our monitoring and vigilance, our military is maintaining a full readiness posture in close cooperation with the United States. The National Security Council also convened for a meeting after the launch, and it condemned the provocative acts of the North, which continue to create tensions on the Korean peninsula. And they noted that the ballistic missiles were in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions, as well as the September Inter-Korean Comprehensive Military Agreement. And SJ, as you said, it's been 2 weeks since North Korea has conducted missile tests, which seemed like a short span.
Yeah.
But given the most recent provocations that came almost every 2 days, it almost felt like a peaceful, quiet 2 weeks. And October 14th, in fact, was the last time the North had conducted some provocative acts. And this is also the 14th round of missile tests that Pyongyang has held since the Yoon Suk-yeol administration kicked off.
Yeah, North Korea has been conducting these missile tests from the very start of this year. And then there was a brief moment during the summertime when they didn't conduct any of these tests. And it was like almost unusual that they're not having any missile test. We're so used to them having these different ballistic missile tests, but it's never a good thing. Of course, the big question is not when they're going to be conducting these missile tests, but again, the nuclear weapons test, if and when it does happen. So the U.S. government, by the way, released a report which states that nuclear attack by North Korea will result in the end of the country's regime there. Where is this message coming from, and what other information is included in this report, Bo-kyung?
Right. So the U.S. Department of Defense released its 2022 National Defense Strategy on Thursday, which contained a strong message towards North Korea. In the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review, which was released as a part of the National Defense Strategy, the U.S. clearly stated that any nuclear attack conducted by North Korea against the United States or its allies and partners is unacceptable and will result in the end of that regime. The report writes, while North Korea is not a rival on the same scale as China and Russia, nonetheless, it presents deterrence dilemmas for the United States and its allies and partners. The U.S. will also hold North Korea responsible for any transfer of nuclear weapons or related materials and technology to other actors. The report wasn't just about warning North Korea. It also stressed the importance of forging regional cooperation. For instance, the report states that a quadrilateral dialogue between the U.S., South Korea, Japan, and Australia should be built for the security of the Indo-Pacific region and to strengthen deterrence, which could be in the forms of of periodically meeting at higher levels of seniority. The report also wrote that North Korea can also conduct rapid strategic attacks in East Asia, short of nuclear use. And as for the strategic attacks, as we all know, South Korea and the U.S. have been warning about a potential seventh nuclear test.
I find it interesting that they mentioned this quadrilateral dialogue between the U.S., South Korea, Japan, and Australia, because if you just take out South Korea and put in India, it's the Quad. For the longest time, the U.S. has kind of been going, listen, join this alliance here. It would no longer be called the Quad anymore if you have five countries. But also the fact that they say it's not the same scale as China and Russia. Of course, China is not a nuclear threat for the United States. It's more of an economic threat, whereas, Russia is a nuclear threat. For sure. Even without this strategy, I'm sure that the U.S. would respond very, very harshly if they do use a nuclear weapon. We're not talking about nuclear tests and actually using a nuclear weapon on whatever country there. In related news, part of cooperation with allies and partners are joint military drills against North Korea's potential attacks. And one of the major training is coming up next week between the U.S. and South Korea. You got more on this.
Yes, the Vigilant Storm is coming up. That's the name of the major combined air drills between Seoul and Washington for 5 days starting on Monday. And they aim to verify the two allies' deterrence capabilities against North Korea's tensions, including a potential nuclear test. Now, according to South Korea's Air Force Friday, around 240 military aircraft will be involved. That's 140 from South Korea, which includes F-35A stealth jets, F-15K, and KF-16 fighters, as well as KC-330 tankers. And then the rest of the 100 assets from the U.S., of course, including F-35B jets, EA-18 electronic warfare aircraft, and KC-135 tankers. I believe all of these names don't really say much to the average people. But
the most important thing is jets, aircrafts, and tankers.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And what seems to be the most significant deployment this time around is the U.S.'s first dispatch of the F-35B jets. And they're known for their short takeoff and also vertical landing capability. And Bo-young earlier mentioned about, the cooperation also with Australia, right? The envisioned cooperation. And here, also during this training coming up next week, Australia's Air Force is expected to join the drills with its KC-38 tanker transport. And these exercises are to include around-the-clock key air operations such as strike package flight, the provision of air defense, and emergency air interdiction, according to South Korea's Air Force today. And also what I want to mention is that this Friday was the final day of South Korea's annual Hoguk military drills, which lasted for 12 days. And U.S. troops also took part this year.
Right.
So the missile test by North Korea today may have been a show of force against the Hoguk as well as the upcoming Vigilant Storm exercises.
That's right. In the meantime, we're going to talk about a story that we kind of covered yesterday. We have some updates on this. Despite some opposition from certain people, South Korea will go ahead and participate in Japan's fleet review next month. We know what South Korea said in regards to this. We know how some of the critics of this particular participation feel about it. But what was the response from the Japanese government, Bo-young?
Right. So regarding South Korea's decision to take part in Japan's fleet review scheduled to be held in November, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno said, on Friday, Japan is aiming to promote regional peace and stability through strengthened trust and goodwill with the naval forces of all countries participating in its international fleet review, including South Korea. Matsuno said that Japan will be hosting the multilateral Western Pacific Naval Symposium around the time of the fleet review and that all member states, including South Korea, were invited. The South Korean Defense Ministry announced plans on Thursday to send the logistics support ship Soyang to the event along with countries including the U.S., Britain, and Japan. The last time South Korea took part in the event was in 2015 under the Park Geun-hye administration.
That's right. But what was the response from the United States?
So when asked about the U.S. response, the Defense Department spokesperson Martin Mainers said that he does not have a comment on this specific event, but that Secretary Austin and Assistant Secretary Ratner have both spoken with their ROK and Japan counterparts this month about the importance of trilateral security cooperation.
That's right. I mean, the trilateral cooperation is not the controversial part. Again, it's the use of the rising sun flag by the Japanese Navy, and that's I mean, they say that well, it just looks like that. I mean, this is a flag that we have to use, and it is what it is. But I mean, if it's that big of a problem, I said just change it. But they're not going to do that. Let's shift gears to the economy this time, and we're going to be starting abroad today over to the U.S. because their economy actually rebounded in the third quarter of this year, which is quite a surprising turnaround from the first half of the year, where they saw 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So let's get the figures of this.
Right. It's the first growth of the U.S. economy this year. Its GDP in the July to September period increased 2.6% on an annualized basis, according to preliminary data released by the U.S. Commerce Department on Thursday local time. So this is even above the Dow Jones forecast of a 2.3% rise.
Right.
And if we take a look at the first and second quarters, we had negative growth for 2 consecutive quarters, as you said, minus 1.6% in Q1 and 0.6% in Q2. So these latest results have eased fears of recession, at least temporarily. Experts note there are still key areas that show slowing down figures like consumer spending and private investment. In fact, consumer spending went up by just 1.4% in the third quarter, which is down from 2% in the previous one, and gross private domestic investment dropped 8.5%. Positive figures were posted in exports, which jumped 14.4%, while imports declined by 6.9%. Although technically the U.S. is not in a recession, economists doubt the Q3 strength will be sustained. In fact, even worse conditions are expected in the first half of next year, with experts seeing a real recession coming up with the continuous interest rate hikes. Some predict in the first quarter next year, the country will start to enter a mild recession, and probably not only the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that the fourth quarter might not see a positive growth anymore because they're saying that consumers are very wary of the inflation right now, and what comes in the fourth quarter, it's holiday season, right? And so a lot of spending is going to be cut down quite a bit, so they're going to see negative growth on that front, which is why I believe the U.S. stocks earlier today, like the Dow Jones went up, but all the tech-heavy stocks went down quite a bit. NASDAQ went down because you have companies like Amazon, right? And they're saying that it doesn't seem rosy for them in the fourth quarter. What is also quite surprising is that the European Central Bank, I mean, they're taking another giant step following big step increases last month. What exactly is going on here? Poogyang, fill us in on this.
Sure. So the European Central Bank increased its base interest rate by 0.75% point from 1.25% to 2%. So it's the third time in a row that ECB has been raising its base interest rates. Since ECB took a big step last July for the first time in 11 years, giant steps followed for 2 consecutive months to tame inflation. For our listeners out there, it's called a big step when the hike is more than 0.5% point, and it's a giant step if it's more than 0.75 percentage point. In a press briefing, Christine Lagarde, the ECB president, said that a fast interest rate hike is the most appropriate way to tame inflation and promote economic recovery, and that ECB's primary goal is to fight inflation and stabilize consumer prices. She also said that economic activities within the Eurozone that slowed down substantially in the third quarter will continue to do so until early next year, and that, if necessary, further interest rate hikes can be expected to return to the target inflation level of 2%. In fact, consumer prices in the 19 euro-denominated countries increased in average 6 to 9% compared to a year ago. For instance, Germany seeing a hike of 9.9%, France 6.2%. Also, the terms and conditions of the targeted longer-term refinancing operations called the TLTROs will be changed as well. The TLTRO is a scheme that lends 2.1 trillion euro to commercial banks at ultra-low interest rates for 3 years. But this interest rate will also be changed from the 23rd of November to tighten the already scaled-up balance sheets of the banks. According to ECB, TLTRO3 will have to follow the overall monetary policy of ECB, and that the lending interest rate of banks will be aligned with ECB's base interest rate.
Yeah, the thing about the European Central Bank, and I'm glad you brought this up in our report today, is because some people might be going, well, if they increase it by 75 basis points and it goes to 1.25 to 2%, 2% compared to some of the other central banks is not so bad. But the European Central Bank, traditionally, they have very, very low interest rates. So it's even really rare to see anything above like even 1% is the thing. But I keep questioning whether or not these interest rate hikes actually do tame inflation, because I mean all the central banks have been increasing their rates for some quite time now, and are we seeing any effects on the inflation? I don't think so. And so if the policymakers are continuously saying, listen, this is the only way we're going to tame inflation, we're just going to keep seeing inflation. I mean, what is it? The interest rates go up and up and up. And what do we see eventually is the economy slowing down significantly. And this is we're looking at a global slowdown in the economy. I mean, there's no end to it, to be honest with you.
And this will continue because I think Christine Lagarde strongly said that she will have to raise it again and again.
Oh, I'm sure, because I mean the U.S. Fed is going to be increasing it quite a bit. I think they said they're not going to stop until they hit like 4.5%. And then what is the Bank of Korea going to have to do? I mean, they're going to have to. I don't think the Bank of Korea is going to be able to match it to 4.5, because that's like. They have to take into consideration that so many people have household debt right now with all the mortgages that they have to pay off. But you have a reversal already. The Korean won is going to continue to depreciate against the U.S. dollar, because I just don't see a situation where the Bank of Korea is going to keep up with the U.S. Fed. But yeah, you see numbers like this right now with the European Central Bank. It is quite alarming, to be honest with you. Let's come back here to the nation here. President Yoon holding the first meeting of the Presidential Advisory Council on Science and Technology today. Booking, let's also get the latest on this.
Sure. So the Presidential Advisory Council on Science Technology will perform as an advisory control tower to the president in designing mid to long-term policy directions. The president will be the chair of the council. And I don't have the update yet, but according to the Ministry of Science, Technology, Information and Communication, 12 national strategic technologies to be fostered were selected, which include semiconductor, display, secondary batteries, high-tech mobility, next-generation nuclear power, high-tech biotechnology, space, air, marine, hydrogen, cybersecurity, AI, next-generational communication, robotics, and quantum technologies.
That's a lot of stuff there, to
12.
be honest with you. Yeah. By the way, President Yoon also named a new deputy NIS director as well. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. Something that we also covered on our headlines when I started off the program, the government having decided to implement a temporary exemption of gas tariffs for the cold winter season. We did mention that this was going to be the big concern, right? We were talking about how it seems like inflation is kind of slowing down and things like that, and it's because the gas prices are dipping down. But no, the gas prices are going back up once again, and what come winter, because of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia cutting back on the natural gas, and Australia not having enough gas to supply to South Korea, because South Korea has been the biggest, South Korea was getting most of their natural gas from Australia from the get-go since the start of the Russian invasion on Ukraine. So there was a lot of concerns this winter. So let's get the details of this.
Sure. So the government announced this Friday that it will remove tariff on imported gas and a number of food items until the end of March. This measure is to help lower utility pressure on inflation during the cold season coming up. So in specific, tariffs will be temporarily lifted on imported liquefied natural gas or LNG and liquefied petroleum gas or LPG that are used for heating. So this is expected to cut monthly city gas bills rose by around 1,400 won, a little less than $1 per household. Heating expenses had sharply risen this year on the heels of LNG price hikes in the third quarter, which led to an increase in city gas prices 4 times this year. Meanwhile, in terms of food items, those selected to be exempt from import taxes are fruits like bananas, mangoes, and pineapples. Currently, there is a 30% tariff on such tropical fruits. Taxes will be reduced for pollock, and the zero tariff on eggs will be extended until June next year.
I had no idea there was a zero tariff on eggs. But, when it comes to gas, what's really concerning is that the people impacted by this the most are those with the lower end of the income. Because when you live in, those people that don't live in the apartments, right, they have to always have the heater on, time to time so that their pipes doesn't freeze and things like that. And, you guys seen gas bills during the wintertime.
Yeah.
It is very, very costly here. I completely forgot that this season is coming up right now. Kimjang season. Pogyeong, do you make kimchi with your family or anything?
I used to, but since I started living in Korea again, I stopped doing it.
So that means...
so when you were abroad,
When I was living
you had to
abroad,
make
I
it
had to
if you wanted
because,
to eat
no
it.
one makes it for me. But here I have both of my mothers giving me some, so I don't really make it here. And you can buy it everywhere.
So your very famous cousin doesn't get any of that kimchi?
Well, not from me, at least.
The reason why we talk about this, I don't know if people know who Pogyeong's famous cousin is. Maybe we'll talk about this next time. But
I think I'll try to start making kimchi.
Pogyeong is cousins with Damien. He's the host of what is it, Radio Us, I think. Well, anyways, Kimjang season. The point I'm trying to make here, Kimjang season is just around the corner right now. We talked about during even the summertime how agriculture prices, vegetable prices have skyrocketed. The big question now remains with the Kimjang season right around the corner. Like, have the cabbage and radish prices stabilized, or will kimchi prices be, I guess, higher this year?
Well, we'll still have to see. The government plans to release its garlic, pepper, and onion reserves starting from next month, which will be about 10,000 ton because supply this year were less than last year. And for instance, 5,000 tons of garlic will be released to the consumers at 30% discount. And also 500 tons of bay salt or 천일염, which is the specific type of salt that we use for kimjang, will also be released to the market with a 30% discount as well. So the government is really trying to give some discount to the consumers and to lessen the burden. And as for the cabbage and radish prices or production, the government expects that this year's production will be similar to the level of last year. However, because of less rain last month, the production of cabbage was delayed and will be distributed starting next month. And then the Ministry of Agriculture will promote discount schemes with retailers such as 농협 and Hanaro and so on to promote the sales of produce to prepare for the kimjang season. The Marine Ministry will also promote the sales of bay salt, salted shrimps or 새우젓, and so on. So the government will also be running a dedicated team to make sure that the supply and demand, discount of all the related items will be managed well.
Really shows you how serious South Korea is when it comes to kimchi. But I think that's the other thing for our listeners out there. I think you don't understand how much is put in when you're making kimchi, right? And so, when Pogyeong was talking about how she's not, doing the kimjang thing anymore, I'm pretty sure she's very happy because there's so much that goes in. So we're not just looking at prices. We don't have not just concerns over the prices of cabbages and radishes and things like that. You have to look into, like we said, it's not just those table salt they use. We use sea salt. There's shrimp brines that are being used. There's sometimes people use pears and all sorts of different. Everyone has their different ingredients, and you can see they say like in the Western cultures to see how bad the inflation is. They look at the prices of bread. So when prices of bread goes up, they say inflation is bad. And also the other thing that they look at, I know these days here in South Korea, bagels are very popular. There's apparently one bagel shop that everyone's been lining up on.
Yeah. I think I know which one
London
you're talking about.
bagels?
Yeah, there you go.
I wasn't going to mention it. We're not promoting it, but...
Well, it doesn't. They don't need any more promotion in the first place. But they say that in especially like I don't know why I don't know if London's famous for bagels, but like New York City is very famous for bagels, right?
Right.
So they say a barometer of how bad the inflation is in New York, especially when you buy bagels, if the inflation is very high and the economy is not so good, the bagel is actually smaller.
Oh.
And so if
They make it smaller?
they actually, well, because they're actually making it all by hand, and so they're using less ingredients because bagel is one of those like staple foods. It's like, cheap foods, right? You could get it like from your corner store and things like that. So it makes no sense to sell bagel at a higher price. You want to keep it at the same price.
Just make them smaller.
Yes, exactly. So they say when the economy gets better, the bagels, get bigger as well. But here in South Korea, you see this with like kimchi and whether or not family members are making like because sometimes they make like 100 cabbages and like 200 cabbages and things like that. And I heard that some families are even calling off kimjang season this year and just make individual kimchis or just buy it off the supermarket if that's the cheapest way.
Right.
But it is very concerning. All of this, and you guys might be wondering why we're talking about kimjang season, but all of this is, of course, part of the economy discussion that we're having here. Let's move on to something that's also starting to become a concern once again. So rightfully so, covering this. We're going to get the latest on the COVID-19 updates. We saw a significant downtick in the number of cases in the past few weeks. And all of a sudden, I believe as of last week, we started seeing an increase here. So number-wise, has there really been a rise in cases lately? So let's get the updates here.
Well, this Friday, almost 36,000 new cases were reported, and that's almost 1,000 more than yesterday. And when we compare today's figure to last Friday, it's a rise by over 11,000 cases.
Jeez.
So we are seeing an increase here. And also the reproduction rate was at 1.09. So for the second straight week, we are seeing a spread in cases, as a number above 1 means that cases are spreading. There has been also 60 cases from abroad, and 252 people are currently in severe or critical condition, and 31 people have been reported dead due to COVID-19 in the past day. Now, I've been mentioning all these kinds of numbers here, but starting on the 31st, so I think that would be Monday, right?
Yeah.
We probably won't be talking so much about these numbers anymore because the government is making a change to its announcement of these daily figures. So the KDCA usually had released these press releases every day in the morning, but they won't be doing that on a daily basis anymore. But instead, they will have these numbers released on their homepage. So there's going to be less reporting, I believe. And last but not least, I also want to mention that the government, the health authorities have been stressing that people should be ventilating a lot these days. And they are stressing this because it's colder, people are not opening their windows anymore that often, but they should do that to contain the spread of the virus.
Yeah, and that was kind of the problems both during the summertime and the wintertime during the height of the pandemic, because come summertime, they have the air conditioners on. So like they say, shut off, you can't open the windows or the doors or anything like that, which is why one of the major outbreaks that we talked about was at a cafe where they had the air conditioner on, and they found out that the aerosol, it was traveling through the air conditioner, and they weren't ventilating enough. And then come wintertime, it's so cold that they're just not opening any of the doors and the windows in these businesses, and that's when everything gets trapped. And we still have this, Halloween is coming up again, and I know once I mentioned this and we kind of had fun with the Halloween weekend and how we're probably not going to be doing anything in the first place, but it is the first Halloween weekend where I think the restrictions have been lifted and things like that. People are probably going out to clubs on Itaewon. I don't know where young people go these days for Halloween and things like that.
Itaewon it is.
Yeah, but listen, the fact is the pandemic is not over with, and we are seeing a rebound in the cases right now. And so, we talked about this in the past, like it's when we are lax, when we start seeing a spike in cases. People are still dying from this. Be very careful during the weekend, guys. And this holds true for you guys as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. Have a safe weekend, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.